Zane Brooks hadn't expected to be pulled off the side of a dark highway at midnight, staring at a woman in heels, soaked from the rain, waving frantically at his beat-up Chevy. "Please," she said, breathless, hugging her coat tighter. "I've been out here for half an hour. My car died, no signal." "Can you give me a ride?" Zane looked at the backseat, where his 6-year-old son, Jace, was fast asleep under a blanket, clutching his superhero lunchbox. He hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, get in." The woman climbed in quick, her coat dripping water onto the floor. "I'm sorry," she said, brushing hair from her face. "It's been a night." "You and me both," Zane muttered, pulling back onto the road. He glanced at her. "Where to?" "Downtown, the Glassmore Hotel," Zane blinked. That was the kind of hotel you only saw in movies or on the nights he drove past it with Jace and made up stories about the people inside. But he didn't ask questions. He just drove. "I'm Bianca," she said after a long silence, her voice calmer now. "Thank you for stopping." "Most people just flew past." "Zane," he replied with a nod. "And that's Jace. He's out cold, long day," she smiled, softening. "He's adorable." Zane's jaw tightened. "He's my whole world." They rode in silence after that, the rain tapping steadily against the windshield. When he finally pulled up to the glowing entrance of the Glassmore, Bianca hesitated. "You really saved me tonight," she said, fishing something from her coat pocket. "Can I at least give you?" "No," Zane cut her off. "Keep your money, I didn't do it for that." Bianca stared at him, surprised. "Then, let me buy you coffee sometime," he shrugged. "Sure, if it's not at a place with valet parking." She laughed, stepped out, and disappeared into the hotel's gold-lit lobby. Zane didn't think he'd see her again, but he did. 3 days later, she showed up at the auto shop where he worked. He was under a car, grease up to his elbows, when her heels clicked across the concrete. "Hey, mechanic man," she teased. Zane rolled out from under the car and nearly dropped the wrench. "You again? I owed you a coffee, I keep my word." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "You tracked me down," I asked around. "You left an impression." Zane eyed her tailored black coat and sleek hair. She looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom, not an oil-stained garage. "You sure you're not lost?" "I'm sure." She held up 2 to-go cups. "One's black, no sugar." "I guessed." He took it reluctantly, still watching her like she might sprout wings and fly off. "Thanks." They sat on the curb outside the shop, sipping coffee while Jace played with his toy truck under a nearby tree. Bianca watched him for a long time. "You're doing this on your own?" she finally asked. Zane nodded. "Jace's mom left when he was 2, said she wasn't cut out for it." "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He shrugged. "We manage, he's a good kid." Bianca looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're a good dad." That hit harder than he expected. Something shifted between them that day, something neither of them said out loud. She started dropping by the shop more often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with lunch, sometimes just to talk. Zane didn't ask questions, but he noticed things. Her shoes were always expensive. Her phone never stopped buzzing. And once, when she leaned over to show him a video of a dog wearing sunglasses, he caught a glimpse of an email subject line: "Board meeting agenda." Still, she never said what she did for a living, and Zane never pushed. Until one evening, 2 weeks later, when she showed up outside the garage just as he was locking up. "I need your help," she said, breathless. "I've got a corporate dinner at the Grand Crest, and I don't want to go alone." He frowned. "You want me to go with you?" She nodded. "It's stupid, I know, but I've had the worst week, and I want someone real at that table, someone who won't fake laugh or pitch me a startup idea over steak." Zane looked down at his worn boots, then at her. "I don't have a suit." "You don't need one," she smiled. "You just need to show up." He didn't understand what he was walking into until they pulled up to the Grand Crest, and a valet opened his door like he was royalty. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of glittering dresses, crystal glasses, and people who'd never changed their own oil. Zane leaned toward her. "Bianca, what do you do?" She hesitated, then finally said it. "I'm the CEO of Corinth Tech." He stared. You're the Bianca Kessler," she winced. "Guilty." Zane took a step back. "You're the woman on the magazine covers. The one who bought that robotics company." "I didn't lie," she said quickly. "I just didn't bring it up." He ran a hand through his hair. "Why me, Bianca? Why bring me here?" "Because you're the only person who's talked to me like I'm just me, not a title." Not a net worth. Zane looked at her, his chest tight. And what if I don't fit into your world? Then I'll make room in it. He didn't respond right away. But when she reached for his hand under the table later that night, he didn't pull away. And when she introduced him just as Zane to a group of investors and smiled like he was the only person in the room, something in him cracked open. He wasn't just some guy who picked her up on a rainy night. He was someone she chose to see. And for the first time in a long time, Zane started to believe maybe someone could see him and still want to stay. Zane adjusted the stiff collar of the navy blazer Bianca had handed him 20 minutes earlier, still trying to process the sheer absurdity of where he was. The ballroom was unlike anything he'd ever stepped foot in, polished marble floors gleaming under golden chandeliers, waiters gliding past with trays of champagne, and a string quartet playing soft, classical music from a raised platform near the far wall. He didn't belong here. Every instinct told him so. Bianca, however, looked completely at ease, her expression serene as she led him further into the room, her hand lightly resting on his arm. "Don't worry about what anyone else thinks," she said quietly. "They don't matter tonight." "Easy for you to say," Zane muttered. "You probably know half these people." "I do," she said, "and most of them are insufferable." He didn't laugh. He was too busy noticing the way a couple near the ice sculpture raised their brows when they saw them walk in together. Bianca didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge it. She guided him to a long table near the front, where place cards bore names he didn't recognize but whose suits likely cost more than his monthly rent. "This was a mistake," Zane said under his breath as they sat. "I should have let you come alone." Bianca turned to him, her voice low but firm. "I didn't ask you to come because I needed a plus one. I asked because I wanted someone here who doesn't want anything from me." "You sure about that?" he said, his tone sharper than intended. "Because I'm starting to wonder what you want from me." She didn't blink. "Honesty." "Something I haven't had in a while." Before he could answer, a man in a charcoal gray tuxedo approached their table. His features were sharp, his expression practiced a face made for magazine profiles. "Bianca," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you tonight." "I thought you were in Zurich." "Change of plans," she replied coolly. "Charles, this is Zane." Charles looked him over, eyes pausing deliberately on Zane's worn boots that barely passed for dress shoes. "Pleasure." Zane gave a tight nod. "Likewise." Charles turned back to Bianca. "You're full of surprises lately." "Only the good kind," she said, her smile polite but thin. Once Charles walked away, Zane leaned in. "Friend of yours. Used to be on the board," she said. "Now he consults. Thinks that makes him important." Zane stared at her. "You talk like someone who's been doing this for decades." "I started early," she said. "Didn't have a choice." Before he could ask what she meant, the lights dimmed and a woman stepped up to the podium at the front of the room. Zane tuned out the speech, his eyes drifting to Bianca. She clapped when expected, smiled when necessary, but otherwise seemed miles away. When dinner came a plate of something small and complicated, Zane picked at it while Bianca barely touched hers. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "This world, it's all polish and performance." "I built it, but sometimes it feels like a cage." Zane didn't respond right away. "Then why stay in it?" "Because walking away means giving up everything I fought for," he nodded slowly. "I get that." She looked at him, really looked, and he knew she saw the truth in his eyes. That he understood what it meant to fight for something, to hold it together day after day because no one else would. After dinner, they slipped out early. Bianca didn't explain, and Zane didn't ask. She just took his hand and led him through a side hallway, past a velvet rope, and onto a rooftop terrace with a view that stretched across the city's entire skyline. The wind tugged at her hair as she leaned on the railing. "I used to come up here when I was a junior analyst. Before I became the face of anything." Zane stood beside her, watching the movement of headlights below. "You really were just going to let me think you were some stranded office worker. I wanted one part of my life to feel normal." He turned toward her. And now she met his gaze. "Now I'm not sure I want it to go back to the way it was." He should have stepped away. Should have reminded himself that they came from two different planets, but instead he said, "Jace goes to bed at 8. I've got a couple hours most nights where I'm just sitting on my porch." "That an invitation?" "No," he said. "It's a warning." She smiled, not the polite kind she wore in the ballroom, but something real. I'll take my chances. They stood there a while longer, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable. The next morning, Zane returned to the auto shop early. His coworker, Marcus, was already there, tank top stained with oil and sweat despite the cool air. You missed the game last night, Marcus said, tossing him a coffee. Had a thing, Zane replied, sipping. With a friend. Marcus raised a brow. A friend who drives a black town car and wears heels that cost more than my rent, Zane didn't answer. You sure that's a good idea, man? Marcus asked. That kind of woman, she's not just visiting our world, she's got a penthouse in hers, Zane shrugged. She doesn't pretend otherwise. Later that evening, Bianca showed up again, but not in a car. She walked, in jeans, carrying a paper bag of takeout. I figured you didn't eat at that dinner either, she said, holding it up. Zane stepped aside to let her in, motioning toward the porch table. Jace was curled up on the couch inside, watching a cartoon with the volume low. They ate in quiet for a while before Bianca spoke. My father was a factory worker. He died when I was 14. After that, my mom worked double shifts to keep our house. Zane looked up. I don't tell people that, she said. But I thought you should know, he nodded. Thanks for telling me, she leaned back. What about you? My dad left when I was 10. My mom passed 5 years ago. And Jace, he's the best thing that ever happened to me, even if he came from someone who didn't stick around. For the first time, Bianca looked unsure. I'm not great at sticking around either. Zane didn't flinch. Then why are you still here? She didn't answer right away. But the way her eyes held his said enough. That night after she left, Zane stood at the front door for a long time. He knew nothing about what came next, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid to hope. Hope that maybe some people didn't just pass through. Maybe some actually stayed. Zane hadn't planned to see Bianca again before the weekend. But by Thursday evening, there she was, standing in the doorway of the auto shop with her hair pulled back, no makeup, and a cardboard box in her arms. I brought something, she said, her tone lighter than usual. Zane glanced at Marcus, who was balancing a carburetor on a workbench. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing and disappeared into the garage bay. Zane wiped his hands off on a rag. What is it? Bianca placed the box on the hood of a half-finished pickup. Tools, from my dad's old collection. I figured you'd know what to do with them better than I would. Zane flipped open the box and whistled low. These are good quality. You sure you want to give them up? They've been sitting in a storage unit for years, she said. I couldn't bring myself to sell them. But something told me they'd get more use here. He pulled out a wrench, its weight solid and familiar. Well, I'll put them to work. Bianca looked around the cluttered shop. You ever think about expanding? Zane blinked. Expand, you've got skills, Zane, and clearly people trust you. With the right setup, you could open a second bay, maybe even hire a few apprentices. He leaned against the work table. You want me to become a tycoon now. I want you to stop thinking small because you've always had to. He studied her. You offering to invest? She shook her head. I'm offering to help you write a business plan. What you do with it is up to you. He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes drifted to the clock. I've got to pick up Jace from school. You want to come? Bianca's expression shifted just slightly. If you're sure. By the time they pulled up to the school, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Jace stood near the fence with his backpack slung over one shoulder, talking animatedly to a teacher's aide. When he saw Zane, his whole face lit up. He ran straight to the truck but paused when he saw Bianca step out of the passenger side. Hi there, she said, crouching to his eye level. I'm Bianca. I've heard a lot about you. Jace tilted his head. You're the one who brings Dad food sometimes. Zane groaned. You weren't supposed to say that out loud, buddy. Bianca laughed. No offense taken. I'm glad someone appreciates it. Jace studied her a moment longer. You want to see my rock collection? Zane's brow lifted. You never show that to anyone. Jace shrugged. She looks like she won't break them. Back at the house, Jace dumped a shoebox full of small, oddly shaped stones onto the coffee table. Bianca knelt beside him, listening intently as he pointed to each one and explained why it was special. Zane watched from the kitchen, something tightening in his chest. Later, after Jace had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Bianca sat on the porch steps with her hands curled around a mug of tea. I've never had a kid trust me that fast, she said. Jace knows when someone's real. He doesn't waste time on people who aren't, she nodded slowly. I never got that from my mom. After my dad died, she kind of shut off. It was all work and bills and silence. Zane leaned against the railing. Must have been rough. It made me independent, she said, but it also made me wary. I never learned how to let people in without measuring the risk. He looked at her for a long moment. And me, you still measuring? I was, she admitted. But I stopped when I realized you'd already walked through the front door. I just hadn't noticed. The air between them shifted then, quiet but full. Zane stepped down to sit beside her. I don't know what this is, he said, but I haven't felt this kind of calm in a long time. Bianca turned to him. Then let's not name it yet. Let's just keep showing up. The next week passed in a blur. Bianca kept her word. She returned with spreadsheets and mock-ups, even contacted a friend who specialized in small business funding to look at Zane's shop. Zane, in turn, fixed the heater on her building's rooftop unit and replaced the alternator in her assistant's car. On Saturday, she invited him and Jace to a private event, an outdoor benefit for a local children's foundation. Bianca was on the board, but she didn't mention that. Zane hesitated. You sure we won't stick out? It's a picnic with pony rides and cotton candy, she said. You'll be the most popular ones there. She wasn't wrong. Jace made fast friends with a group of kids, and Zane found himself surprisingly at ease among the mix of donors and volunteers. Bianca stayed close, never introducing him as anything other than Zane, never pushing. At one point, a photographer approached them. Do you mind? He asked, gesturing to the camera. Zane started to decline, but Bianca nodded. Go ahead. The flash went off just as Zane turned toward her, catching something unguarded in both their faces. They didn't speak on the drive back. Jace was asleep in the backseat again, but the silence felt full, not strained. It wasn't until the next morning that the shift came. Zane was sweeping the shop floor when Marcus came rushing in with a folded newspaper in his hand. You seen this? He asked, slapping it onto the counter. Zane's eyes landed on the photo, the one from the event. Him, Bianca, and Jace. Underneath it was a caption that read, Tech Titan Bianca Kessler attends fundraiser with mystery man and child. His stomach dropped. He tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. Hours passed. No word. By nightfall, he was pacing the porch, heart pounding in his chest. When a sleek black car finally pulled up, Zane stepped off the porch before the driver could even open the door. Bianca climbed out, her jaw tight. Why didn't you tell me the press would be there? He demanded. I didn't know they would, she said. They weren't supposed to be photographing anyone without clearance. Well, they did, he snapped. And now my kid's face is in the paper next to yours. Bianca's voice dropped. I'm sorry, Zane, I should have anticipated it. He ran a hand over his face. You said this could be something real. But I can't have Jace dragged into your world without warning. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said. But I won't pretend it's not my world. He met her eyes. Maybe that's the problem. Bianca stepped back like she'd been slapped. So what are you saying? I'm saying I need time, he said, to figure out if this is something I can protect him from or something I'm inviting him into. She nodded once, her throat tight. Then I'll wait. But I'm not walking away. As she drove off, Zane stood in the driveway, the paper still clutched in his hand. The lines between their worlds had blurred. Now came the hardest part, deciding if they could survive what came next. The silence stretched for 4 days. Zane kept his head down at the shop, focusing on engine rebuilds and brake replacements. Anything to keep his thoughts from circling back to the look on Bianca's face when she'd driven away. Jace noticed the change. He was sharper than most grown men, but Zane managed to distract him with weekend pancakes and a trip to the science museum. On Monday morning, a letter arrived. Not a text, not an email. A letter, handwritten. Folded carefully inside a cream-colored envelope with his name written in pen, Zane opened it in the quiet of the porch while Jace built a Lego tower behind him. I can't promise the world won't try to drag you into mine, but I can promise I'll never let it consume you. Or Jace. I never wanted to be someone with everything who had no one. I know you're protecting your son, I love that about you, but I'm not asking to take over. I'm asking to stand beside you, that's it. B. He read it twice, then once more, slower. That evening, after tucking Jace into bed and setting a timer on the coffee maker, he picked up his phone and called her. "Hi," she answered. "You free tomorrow night?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, meet me at that rooftop." The one with the skyline view. When he arrived, she was already there, leaning on the railing, hair lifted by the breeze. She turned when she heard his steps, but didn't say anything. Zane walked to her side. "I read your letter," he said. "Twice. I meant every word." "I know." He looked out over the city. "I've never had someone write to me like that. You put things into words I didn't even know I was holding back." She didn't reach for his hand this time. She just waited. "I was scared," he admitted. "Still am, not of you. Of change. Of dragging Jace into something that could fall apart." Bianca nodded. "You don't have to rush, but I'm not going to disappear, not unless you ask me to." "I'm not asking that." He turned to face her. "I'm asking you if you'd come over tomorrow night for dinner. Jace found a recipe for lasagna and swears it'll be better than takeout." She laughed, not the careful kind, but the kind that settled somewhere warm between them. "I'd love that." The next evening, Bianca showed up in jeans and sneakers, holding a bottle of sparkling apple cider and wearing the nervous energy of someone meeting a family for the first time. Zane opened the door with flour on his shirt, sauce on his sleeve, and Jace peeking out from behind his leg. Dinner was chaotic. The oven timer went off too early. Jace spilled the salad bowl on the floor, and the lasagna was slightly overcooked, but Bianca rolled up her sleeves, helped clean up, and complimented the crispy edges like they were intentional. After dishes were done and Jace was tucked in, Zane stepped out onto the porch, where Bianca was sitting barefoot on the swing, her eyes closed. "I haven't laughed that much in months," she said. "He likes you," Zane said, leaning against the post. "I like him too," he nodded, then exhaled slowly. "I've been thinking." Bianca looked up. "Dangerous. I've spent years surviving, fixing what's broken, keeping everything running, but I've never stopped to ask what I want beyond that." He paused. "I want more than just survival." She stood, walked over to him. "Then let's build more." He shook his head. "Not just anything, I want us, all of it. You, me, Jace, a full life, together." Bianca's eyes welled, but she blinked quickly. "Even with the press, the board meetings. The luncheons I'll drag you to. If I can handle a 6-year-old's meltdown over missing puzzle pieces, I can handle that." She smiled, but there was a question still lingering in her eyes. Zane stepped closer. "I've got a little saved. Not much, but enough for a ring if you're open to something small, something real." Bianca's breath caught. "Zane, I'm not asking for an answer now," he said, "but I needed you to know where I stand." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she kissed him, slow and certain, like every wall she'd ever built had finally come undone. The next week, she brought Jace to her office the first time ever. He sat in her chair, feet swinging, while Zane stood behind him, watching her navigate a full boardroom with calm authority. Afterward, she knelt beside Jace and let him press the button that shut the blinds to her floor-to-ceiling windows. He declared it the coolest office in the whole world. Zane didn't miss the way her staff looked at her, the respect, the awe, and he didn't miss the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching. They didn't rush the engagement. They didn't need to. But 3 months later, under a canopy of string lights in the backyard that Zane and Jace had decorated themselves, with 20 close friends, a homemade cake, and a borrowed speaker playing their favorite song, they said their vows. Bianca promised to never forget the night he pulled over on that rainy highway. Zane promised to keep showing up. For her. For their life, Jace stood between them, holding both their hands, and when they kissed, the world didn't fall silent or explode in fireworks. It just finally felt like home. Bianca stood at the edge of the garden, barefoot in the grass, her palms dusted with soil. The sun was low, stretching golden light across the backyard, and Zane was on his knees beside the raised beds, gently planting a row of tomato seedlings with Jace. "You're not spacing them right," Jace said seriously, tapping the soil with the end of his little trowel. "You said they need room to breathe." Zane raised an eyebrow. "I did not say that." "You did. Friday. After dinner." Bianca laughed softly and knelt beside them, brushing her hand over Jace's hair. "He's right. You said it when you were arguing with the basil." Zane leaned back on his heels. I'm being double-teamed, Jace grinned. Get used to it. We're a package deal. Bianca's eyes met Zane's, and something in her chest tightened in the best way. She hadn't known she could feel this grounded. Not after years of knowing only boardrooms and hotel suites, calendar alerts and travel lounges. This hands in the dirt, sun on her skin, two people who saw her without the armor. This was everything. Later, after Jace had gone inside to build a Lego spacecraft, Zane handed her a cloth and nodded toward the porch swing. You've got soil on your face. She wiped her cheek, then made a face. I'm a mess. You're perfect. Bianca leaned back against the swing cushion, watching him tie off the garden gloves and hang them on a nail by the shed. When I was a kid, she said, I used to dream about running a company. I wanted to be in control. I thought power would make me feel safe. Zane sat beside her, stretching his legs out. Did it? For a while. She turned to him. But it was lonely. I didn't know how lonely until you showed me what the other side looked like. He reached for her hand, tracing his thumb across her knuckles. You built an empire, you should be proud of that. I am, she said, but I don't want that to be the only thing I leave behind. Zane watched her for a moment. I've been thinking about the shop. Bianca narrowed her eyes. You're not selling it, are you? No, he said. I'm expanding it, she blinked. You decided. I've got the plan drafted. Hired 2 new guys. We're adding a second bay and starting an apprenticeship program for kids aging out of the foster system. Marcus has a cousin who works with a nonprofit. He's putting us in touch. Bianca's eyes warmed. That's incredible. I want Jace to grow up seeing that you don't just survive, he said. You build, you take what you've been given and you make something better. She squeezed his hand. That's exactly what you've done. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind shift through the trees. Then Bianca looked over at him, her voice soft. I've been offered a seat on the State Innovation Council. Zane raised his eyebrows. That's big. It is, she said. But it means stepping away from day-to-day operations at Corinth Tech. I'd still be involved, but not like before. He didn't respond right away. Do you want that? I want to make space for things that matter, for this. She gestured around them. For us, Zane leaned in, brushing his lips against her temple. Then we find a way to do both. You don't have to give up one to keep the other. That night, as they lay in bed with the windows open and the sounds of late spring drifting in, Bianca rested her head on his chest. I never thought I'd find this, she whispered. Zane kissed her hair. You didn't find it, you made it. Every choice, every risk, you built this just like you built everything else. Weeks passed, then months. Summer arrived in full bloom, and with it came changes that felt natural, earned. The expansion of the shop was completed by mid-July. The new apprentices, 2 teenagers with quick hands and sharper minds, started that same week, and Jace insisted on giving them a tour, complete with names for every tool. Bianca transitioned smoothly into her new role on the council, traveling less, speaking more, and advocating for innovation grants in underserved communities. She gave a keynote address at a state summit, and Zane and Jace watched the live stream from the couch, cheering when she closed with a story about a mechanic who taught her about breathing room in business and in life. Every Sunday, they hosted dinner in the backyard. Sometimes just the 3 of them, sometimes with friends, coworkers, or neighbors. Jace took charge of the playlist and insisted on giving toast-like announcements before dessert. One evening, as they cleared the dishes and the fireflies began to glow, Bianca pulled Zane aside. I have something for you, he raised an eyebrow. Another tomato plant. She handed him a small wrapped box. Just open it. Inside was a silver keychain. Attached to it was a custom-made brass tag engraved with the words, Home is where you're seen. Zane turned it over in his hand, then looked up at her. I love you. I know, she said, eyes shining. But it's still nice to hear. He kissed her, right there in the middle of the yard, with the string lights swaying above them and the scent of grilled peaches still lingering in the air. They were married that fall not with fanfare, but with meaning. A quiet ceremony under the oak tree at the edge of their property. Jace wore a vest and tie and stood proudly holding their rings. Bianca wore a simple white dress and no shoes. Zane held her hands and promised her a life that was messy and beautiful and real. After the vows, they danced barefoot on the grass, surrounded by the people who had become their family. Jace tugged at Bianca's skirt halfway through the first song. "Now we're all official, right?" she knelt, cupping his cheeks. "We've been official since the day I saw your rock collection," he nodded solemnly. "Okay, but now you're not just my friend, you're my mom." Bianca's breath caught. She pulled him into her arms. "That's the best title I've ever had." Years later, the house still stood tall and welcoming, with flowers climbing the porch rails and Jace's childhood handprints pressed into the concrete walkway. Zane's auto shop had grown into a local landmark, known not just for repairs, but for second chances. Bianca's work in tech and innovation reshaped policies that gave thousands of people access to opportunities once out of reach. But their greatest legacy was always right there between them in the quiet mornings, the loud dinners, the gentle hands that reached for each other after every storm. They didn't just fall in love, they built it, brick by brick, together.